Vesk Torun had never lost a ranked simulation, and he carried that record the way his ancestors carried warblades, close, polished, ready to be drawn at the first sign of challenge. He stood in the observation ring of Edel Theron, the Galactic Compact's Joint Military Academy, watching the new cycle's cadets file through processing. 14 species, the usual crowd. Draelith like himself, broad-shouldered and scaled, moving with the posture of people who had been told since birth that their spines should never bend. Varathi clicking softly in their clusters, compound eyes cataloging everything. Telleri drifting in their pressure suits, their gaseous bodies shifting colors with each new emotion. And then the humans. 6 of them. They came through the gate in a loose group, not a formation. No synchronized steps, no visible rank structure. They wore simple gray uniforms that looked like they had been issued 5 minutes ago. The one in front, a woman, medium height, dark hair pulled back tight, carried her kit bag over one shoulder like it weighed nothing, or like she had stopped caring about its weight a long time ago. Sergeant Asha Marin. Vesk had read the briefing. First human contingent ever admitted to the Academy. Earth's contribution to the Compact Integration Program. Their species had been part of the Compact for only 11 years, a blink of time compared to the Draelith's 4 centuries. They were, by every official metric, the newcomers, the unknowns. Vesk watched them walk past a group of Kralian cadets, 8-foot insectoids, with chitin plating that could stop a low-caliber round. The humans did not stare, did not tense, did not adjust their pace. They just walked. The first week was orientation, structured sparring rounds, tactical puzzles, physical assessments. Every species got a chance to show what it could do, and Vesk showed plenty. He scored highest in close combat among all cadets. His tactical puzzle times were 14% faster than the next best. When the instructors posted rankings after day 3, his name sat at the top, and it felt like the only place it had ever belonged. The humans scored middle of the pack, on everything. Their sparring was competent but unremarkable. They solved the puzzles in reasonable time but never rushed. In the physical trials, they performed within expected parameters for a species of their size and muscle density. Nothing more. Nothing that would make anyone look twice. Vesk looked twice anyway. It was something in the way Asha watched the other cadets during their sparring rounds. She stood at the edge of the ring with her arms folded, and her eyes moved the way a targeting system moved, not watching the fight, but tracking it, mapping it. Every time a Draelith cadet committed to a strike pattern, her head tilted 2 degrees. Every time a Varathi team executed a flanking drill, her lips pressed together, just slightly, like she was filing something away in a place she would not forget. He told himself it meant nothing. Observation was not performance. The group tactical exercise came on day 5. A simulated base defense. 200 cadets split into mixed species teams, each assigned a role. The scenario was standard, an entrenched position, an incoming enemy force controlled by the Academy's combat AI. 45 minutes to hold the line. Points were awarded for base integrity, enemy casualties, and team coordination. Vesk's team drew the front line. He organized his cadets into overlapping fields of fire, set up fallback positions, designated medics. He ran it the way his people had run defenses for 400 years, and it was clean, and it was beautiful. The humans drew a support role, logistics, resupply, the unglamorous back end of the operation. Vesk barely registered them on his tactical display. 20 minutes in, the AI flanked them. The enemy force split. Half continued the frontal assault. The other half looped wide, hitting the eastern perimeter where a Telleri team was holding a secondary position. The Telleri broke. Not because they were bad soldiers, because gaseous beings in pressure suits were not built for the kind of close-range chaos that followed. Cadets scrambled. Teams repositioned. Vesk pulled 2 squads from his reserve to plug the gap. The whole defense buckled and flexed like a living thing, trying to hold its shape under pressure that kept finding new places to push. And then someone on the tactical display said, "Where are the humans?" Vesk checked. The 6 human signatures were gone from the logistics zone. Found them. 3 kilometers behind the enemy's main force, moving fast, spread in a pattern he did not recognize. They were not running away. They were not repositioning to support the defense. They were behind the enemy. In the next 3 minutes, the following things happened. The enemy's spawn point, the simulation node that generated reinforcements, went offline. A human cadet had reached it and fed it a logic loss command that turned it into scrap code. The enemy's supply cache, ammunition, repair drones, medical supplies, detonated. 2 human cadets had rigged it with the demolition charges that were supposed to be used for base fortification. The enemy's command node, the AI coordination hub that directed all hostile units, was physically dismantled. Asha Marin walked into the structure, pulled 3 cables, and the entire enemy force stopped moving. Not retreated, not regrouped, stopped. Like puppets with their strings cut, the simulation ended. The scoring screen lit up. The defense objective showed partial failure. The base had taken structural damage during the Eastern breach. By the Compact's metrics, the overall mission was a mixed result. Points were awarded and deducted. Teams were ranked. But the room was quiet, because there was nothing on the map. No enemy, no reinforcements, no supply lines, no command structure. The AI had not been defeated. It had been unmade. Every system that allowed it to function as a fighting force had been located and removed with the precision of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. The defense had technically failed, but there was nothing left to defend against. Vesk requested the after-action data that evening. He sat in his quarters and read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, tracing the movement paths of each human cadet on his datapad. They had not reacted to the flanking attack. They had used it. The moment the AI committed forces to the eastern push, it weakened its rear. And the humans had been waiting for exactly that, as if they had known it would happen, as if they had been watching the AI the way Asha had been watching the sparring ring, not to fight it, but to understand where it would break. He searched the Compact's tactical database for a doctrine that matched what they had done. Aggressive bypass, deep strike, decapitation protocol. Nothing fit. Not exactly. Because every doctrine he found was designed to win the battle. The humans had not won the battle. They had made it so there was no battle left to win. Vesk set down his datapad and stared at the ceiling of his quarters for a long time. In his language, there were 47 words for different kinds of victory. Triumph by endurance. Triumph by cunning. Triumph by overwhelming force. Triumph by the enemy's disgrace. He did not have a word for what the humans had done. His language had never needed one. He turned off the light and lay in the dark. And for the first time in his career at the academy, Vesk Torun felt something he could not rank or score or file away. He felt like he had been watching the wrong game the entire time. The Compact's war theory curriculum was 400 years old and had been refined by the greatest military minds of 9 species. It was built on 12 foundational principles called the Pillars of Engagement, and every cadet who graduated from Adil Theron could recite them the way a child recites the alphabet, automatically, without thinking, because the ideas had become the same as breathing. Proportional response, objective hierarchy, controlled escalation, triumphant conclusion. Vesk loved the pillars. They gave war a shape, rules, edges. They said, here is where the violence begins, and here is where it ends. And in between there is honor and skill and the chance to prove that your people are what they have always claimed to be. The humans sat through every lecture. They took notes. They asked no questions. This bothered Vesk more than he could explain. It was not rudeness. Asha, in particular, wrote constantly, filling a small paper notebook. Actual paper, not a datapad, with tight handwriting that Vesk could not read from his seat. She underlined things, drew arrows between notes, circled words. But she never raised her hand, never challenged an instructor, never offered a perspective from human military tradition. It was like watching someone study an animal in a cage, taking careful notes on its habits, never once suggesting that the animal might do something different. The first simulation exam came 3 weeks into the cycle, a planetary siege scenario. Each team received identical conditions, a fortified city, a defending garrison of moderate strength, and 72 simulated hours to capture and hold the objective. The scoring weighted efficiency, casualty ratios, and time to completion. Vesk built his plan like a cathedral. Layer by layer, he cut the city's supply lines on hour 4, established artillery dominance by hour 9, sent psychological warfare broadcasts, offers of fair treatment, demonstrations of overwhelming force by hour 15. The garrison commander began negotiations on hour 26. Formal surrender came on hour 31. Clean, classical, the kind of operation that would be taught in academies for decades. He scored highest in the class, among the alien cadets. Asha's team did not besiege the city. For the first 11 hours, they did nothing visible. Their units held position 3 kilometers outside the operational zone. Sensor data showed they were scanning, deep penetration scans of the city's infrastructure, communication intercepts, thermal mapping of garrison positions. 11 hours of watching. Other cadets joked about it. The Kralian team leader made a comment in the mess hall about humans being afraid of walls. The Telleri, who had lost their siege badly, said nothing, but their colors shifted to the shade that meant second-hand embarrassment. Then, at hour 11, minute 14, the humans moved. They hit 4 targets at the same time. Not military targets, infrastructure. The water purification plant lost its central processor to a precision strike that destroyed nothing else in the building. The power grid was shut down through a cascading failure triggered by a single relay station being disabled. Not destroyed, disabled, in a way that made the grid's own safety protocols turn everything off. The communications relay was jammed so thoroughly that the garrison could not contact its own units across the city. And the ammunition depot was struck with incendiary charges that turned 6 months of ordnance into a pillar of smoke visible for 50 kilometers. The humans did not enter the city. They did not fire on a single garrison soldier. They did not demand surrender. 2 hours later, the garrison contacted them, not with a surrender offer, with a request. They needed water. They needed power. They needed to coordinate their own medical teams because 3 soldiers had been injured in the ammunition depot fire, and the field hospitals could not function without electricity. Asha's team provided all of it. They sent water. They sent portable generators. They opened a medical channel. And while they did this, Asha transmitted a single message to the garrison commander. We are not your enemy. We are the people who can turn your lights back on. Would you like to talk about that? The city opened its gates on hour 14. Not a surrender, a conversation. The scoring system did not know what to do with this. The objective was captured technically. Casualties were 0 on both sides. Time to completion was the fastest of any team. But the garrison had not been defeated. It had been made dependent, and then helped. And in the space between those two things, the concept of resistance had dissolved like sugar in hot water. Vesk stared at the results for a long time. His victory was the best siege in the exercise. Asha's was not a siege at all. It was something else. Something that did not have a column in the scoring matrix. 3 floors above the simulation center, Instructor Halik was having a worse evening. Halik was Varathi, insectoid, compound-eyed, capable of processing 11 data streams simultaneously. She had been assigned to evaluate the human cadets, a task she had initially considered beneath her analytical abilities. Humans were classified in the Compact's military database as aggressive primitive, pre-spaceflight species with nuclear capability but limited strategic doctrine. Dangerous to themselves. The kind of species that burned its own forests and called it progress. She had pulled Earth's military history as background reading. That was her mistake. She started with the ancient wars, simple enough. Territorial conflicts, resource disputes, religious campaigns. Brutal, but recognizable. Every species went through this phase. Then she reached the 20th century, and she stopped recognizing things. A global war. Then another, 20 years later, larger. A species that had not yet left its own atmosphere had built weapons capable of splitting atoms and dropped them on cities full of their own kind. Not because they did not understand what the weapons would do, because they understood exactly what the weapons would do. And they decided the war needed to end more than those cities needed to exist. She read about a concept called mutually assured destruction, a strategy in which 2 nations pointed enough nuclear weapons at each other to end all life on the planet, and then used that fact as the reason not to fight. They had turned extinction into a leash. They had domesticated the apocalypse and made it sit in the corner, like a trained animal. And the entire arrangement had held for decades, through nothing but the shared understanding that everyone involved was crazy enough to go through with it. Now you will never want to fight us again, because we are the ones who turned your lights back on. The same sentence Asha had transmitted to the garrison. Halik's compound eyes processed the data from 11 angles simultaneously, and every single angle arrived at the same conclusion. She filed her report to the Compact Council at 3 in the morning. It was short. It reclassified human military doctrine from aggressive primitive to a new category she had to invent, because nothing in 400 years of compact taxonomy fit what she had found. Existential terminal. A species that did not fight to win. A species that fought to make fighting impossible. And then, this was the part that made her mandibles click involuntarily. A species that rebuilt what it had broken so thoroughly that the broken thing became part of itself. They did not conquer. They did not liberate. They converted. And they did it by being the hand that crushed and the hand that healed in the same gesture, so fast that the target could not tell where the violence ended and the kindness began. The next day, Vesk found Asha in the mess hall. She was eating something from a sealed container she had brought from Earth. It smelled sharp and warm and entirely foreign. She looked up when he sat across from her. "Good siege," she said. "Your encirclement timing was really clean. Thank you." He paused. "What doctrine were you using in your scenario?" She chewed, thought about it, swallowed. "We don't have a name for it," she said. "We just, when something is broken, we do not want to have to fix it twice." She went back to eating. Vesk sat with that sentence for a long time, turning it over in his mind the way he turned over tactical problems, looking for the angle, the weakness, the place where it did not hold up. The threshold had a 23% completion rate across all species in the history of the Academy. No team had ever beaten it. The instructors said this with a kind of pride, the way a mountain might be proud of the bodies on its slopes. The threshold was not designed to be won. It was designed to show you what you were made of when winning stopped being possible. 72 hours, continuous, no rest cycles, multiple environments, urban, jungle, vacuum, aquatic, shifting without warning. The combat AI running the scenario was adaptive. It studied the teams in real time. It learned from their tactics. It escalated. Every cycle the AI got smarter. Every cycle the cadets did not. Vesk had been waiting for the threshold since his first day at the academy. This was the test that separated names from legends, and he intended to be a legend. His war blade was sharpened even though the exercise was simulation only, because ritual mattered, because preparation was a form of respect for the fight ahead. The teams were randomized, mixed species, no choosing your own squad. Vesk drew a team of 9, 2 Kralians, a Telleri, 3 Vorathi, a Drenic pilot, and 2 humans, Asha and Ro. Ro was the other one, the quiet one. Vesk had barely noticed him during the training cycle. He was shorter than Asha, built like something that had been compressed under heavy gravity, and he had scars. Not the decorative kind that some species wore as honor marks. These were the kind that came from things that had gone wrong, in ways that no one had planned. A thick white line ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. His right hand was missing the smallest finger. In 6 weeks of training, Vesk had heard Ro speak exactly 4 times. The threshold began at midnight station time. The first environment was urban, a ruined city, rubble-choked streets, collapsed buildings, sightlines that shifted every time you turned a corner. The AI dropped hostile units in waves, probing attacks, testing reaction times, mapping how the team moved and fought. Vesk took command. No one argued. He was the highest-ranked cadet on the team, and his tactical instincts were sharp, in the way that good instincts are sharp. Fast enough to feel like reflex, precise enough to feel like thought. He positioned the Kralians as his front line. Their chitin armor could absorb the AI's standard weapons fire. The Vorathi ran coordination, their compound eyes tracking multiple threat vectors at once. The Telleri handled electronic warfare. The Drenic stayed airborne, scouting. Asha and Ro he assigned to flank security. A reasonable role. Not glamorous, functional. They took the assignment without comment. The first 24 hours went well. Better than well. Vesk's team moved through the urban environment with discipline, clearing sectors, accumulating points, keeping casualties to 0. When the AI shifted them to jungle terrain at the 18-hour mark, Vesk adapted his formations within minutes. The Kralians struggled in the dense vegetation, too large, too loud, so he pulled them back to a support role and pushed the Vorathi forward as scouts. Good decisions, clean leadership. And through all of it, Asha and Ro did exactly what they were told. They held the flanks, they reported contacts, they fought when fighting was required, and moved when movement was ordered. Competent, professional, unremarkable. But Vesk noticed something. They kept exchanging glances, small ones, a look when the AI changed tactics, a nod when a new environment loaded, micro-expressions that lasted less than a second, carrying information Vesk could not decode. They were having a conversation without words, and he was not invited. Hour 30. The scenario shifted to vacuum, an asteroid field with low gravity and no atmosphere, and the AI escalated. The enemy force tripled, not gradually, all at once. 3 times the expected hostile units poured from behind every rock, every crater, every shadow. The scoring system showed 2 other teams signaling withdrawal. A third had already been eliminated. Vesk's team took casualties for the first time. One of the Vorathi was hit, simulation kill, pulled from the exercise. Then a Kralian took heavy damage to its armor and had to fall back. In 90 minutes, Vesk's team went from 9 functional members to 6, and the enemy kept coming. He started planning a retreat, a controlled withdrawal to a defensible position where they could wait out the clock and preserve their remaining score. It was the smart play, the survivable play, the play that every tactical manual in the compact recommended when the numbers turned against you. Or we end it. Asha's voice. Calm. Not a suggestion, not a request, a statement of available options. delivered the way someone might say, "Or we take the elevator." Vesk turned to her. "We are outnumbered 3-1. The AI has adapted to our formations. Withdrawal is the correct—" "The AI adapted to your formations," Asha said. "That is the point." She laid it out. Quick, no wasted words. The AI was adaptive. It learned. But a learning system has a weakness that a stupid system does not. It can be taught the wrong things. For the next 6 hours, they would feed the AI false data. Move in patterns that looked like panic, but were actually choreographed. Make retreats that were actually advances. Use their remaining forces to create the appearance of a team falling apart, while actually mapping every response the AI generated. The AI would learn from what it saw. It would optimize. It would predict. And with every prediction, it would commit itself deeper to a model of the team that did not exist. Then, when the AI had built its beautiful, optimized, perfectly wrong picture of how they fought, they would do the one thing it had not predicted, the thing it could not predict, because the data it had been fed was a lie. Vesk stared at her. "You want to teach the enemy to be wrong." "Everything that thinks can be made to think wrong," Asha said. 5 words, the most Vesk had heard from him in a continuous sentence. On Earth, we call this fighting the way they do not train you to fight. 6 hours. 6 hours of moving like a beaten team. 6 hours of Vesk suppressing every instinct in his body that screamed at him to hold ground, to fight with honor, to meet the enemy face to face. 6 hours of watching the AI get faster, more confident, more aggressive, because it was winning, and winning made it commit, and commitment was the trap. The Varathi on the team figured it out first. Their compound eyes tracked the AI's response patterns, and by hour 4, they could see the feedback loop forming, the AI optimizing itself into a narrower and narrower band of predicted outcomes, all based on data the humans had carefully designed. Asha said, "Now." They hit like a fist through wet paper. The AI had positioned its forces based on a model that said the team was retreating to Sector 7. The team was not in Sector 7. The team was behind the AI's command structure, inside its communication network, and standing on top of its resource nodes. In 12 minutes, the AI's force went from a coordinated army to a collection of disconnected units with no orders, no supplies, and no understanding of what had happened. They did not retreat. They stopped, the way a brain-dead body stops, still technically present, no longer anyone home. The simulation awarded Vesk's team the highest threshold score in Academy history. The room where the other cadets watched the live feed was silent. Vesk stood in the airlock of the simulation chamber after it was over. His scales were dull with exhaustion. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from the chemical aftermath of 6 hours of sustained deception that had gone against everything he had ever trained to do. He replayed it in his mind, all of it, not just the threshold, everything. The mediocre scores, the middle-of-the-pack performance, the quiet watching, the notes Asha took in her paper notebook. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of sitting in the middle of the class, doing nothing remarkable, asking no questions. 6 weeks of data collection. They had been running the same play on their classmates that they had just run on the AI. Watch, learn, map, file away every tactic, every instinct, every pattern of every species in the academy. Not to compete, not to rank, to understand, so that when the moment came, they would know exactly where every system broke. The humans had not been average. They had been studying. Vesk leaned against the airlock wall. His hands would not stop shaking. He thought about Asha standing at the edge of the sparring ring on day 1, her eyes moving like a targeting system. He thought about the paper notebook, the underlines, the arrows between notes. He understood now what those arrows connected. And for the first time in his life, Vesk Toru knew what it felt like to be watched by something that was not just smarter than you, not just more dangerous than you, but something that had been learning you from the very first handshake, patiently, quietly, with a smile on its face and a notebook in its hand. He did not feel like prey. It was worse than that. He felt like a problem someone had already solved. The civilian ring of Edel Theron was the part of the station that pretended war did not exist. Markets sold spices from 12 worlds. Bars served drinks that glowed in colors some species could not see. Observation decks curved along the outer hull, and through their transparent walls, a gas giant the color of rust and cream turned slowly, endlessly, like a thought that never reached a conclusion. Vesk found Asha at one of those observation decks. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the glass, her legs stretched out, a bottle of something amber between her knees. She was watching the gas giant like it owed her money. "May I sit?" Vesk asked. She moved the bottle to make room. He sat. His scales clicked against the cold floor. For a while, they said nothing. Vesk had spent 40 years learning how to be comfortable in silence. The Drelith considered the ability to share quiet without discomfort a mark of deep respect. But this silence was different. It was not empty. It was full of things neither of them had said yet, pressing against the walls of the conversation, like water behind a dam. Asha broke first. "You want to ask me something?" "Yes. About the threshold. About everything." She took a drink, set the bottle down. "Go ahead." Vesk had prepared questions. Tactical questions, doctrinal questions, the kind of questions one professional asks another when trying to understand a methodology. But sitting here, with the gas giant turning and the market noise drifting from 2 levels below, those questions felt small, like asking a storm about its wind speed. "My people have a concept," he said instead. Kethrin Val. It translates, roughly, to the sacred shape of battle. We believe that war has a form, that it begins in challenge, moves through contest, and ends in acknowledgement. The winner acknowledges the loser's courage. The loser acknowledges the winner's skill. And both walk away changed, but whole. He paused. "This is beautiful to us. This is why we fight. Not for territory or resources, for the shape of it. For the honor of having been tested and having answered." Asha was watching him, not with the targeting system eyes from the sparring ring, with something softer, something that looked like it might be sadness, if sadness could be patient. "Your people do not fight this way," Vesk said. "No." "Why?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she told him about something humans called total war. She explained it simply, the way you explain a natural disaster to someone who has never seen rain. When a human society decided that a threat was real, truly real, not a border dispute, not a trade disagreement, but a threat to the survival of everything they loved, they did not escalate step by step. They did not follow a sacred shape. They removed every limit, every rule, every ceiling, all the resources of the nation, all the intelligence of its scientists, all the production of its factories, all the will of its people. Everything got fed into a single purpose, and that purpose was not victory. It was conclusion. The enemy's armies would be destroyed. Their supply lines would be cut. Their factories would be bombed. Their cities would burn. Their government would be dismantled. Their ability to wage war would be taken apart at every level, military, economic, industrial, psychological, until the concept of fighting back became physically impossible. Vesk listened without moving. "We have done this to each other," Asha said. "Multiple times. Whole generations defined by it. Cities turned to glass. Populations displaced. Things done that cannot be undone. How does your species still exist?" The question came out before Vesk could shape it into something more diplomatic. But Asha did not flinch. Because we also invented mercy, she said, and reconstruction, and foreign aid, and war crime tribunals, and peace treaties that actually hold. She picked up the bottle, looked at it, set it down again. We break things all the way down to the foundation, and then we build them back. Not as conquered territory, as partners, as allies, as people we never want to fight again, because the next time might be the one where nobody walks away. Vesk thought about the siege simulation. The garrison that had opened its gates not in surrender, but in need, and the humans who had answered that need while the smoke from the ammunition depot was still rising. You crush, and then you heal, he said. We end, and then we rebuild. There is a difference. Is there? Asha's mouth curved. Not quite a smile. The crushing is to stop the bleeding. The healing is so it does not start again. We are not kind because we are gentle, Vesk. We are kind because we know what we are capable of, and that knowledge makes kindness feel necessary. 3 floors above them, Instructor Halick was not sleeping either. Her report to the Compact Council, the reclassification of human military doctrine, had triggered a formal inquiry. 3 council members wanted a full threat assessment. 2 others wanted the human cadets expelled from the academy as a precaution. 1 had suggested, quietly and off the record, that Earth should be reclassified from Allied neutral to contained monitored. Halick had spent the last 72 hours compiling the assessment. Her compound eyes ached. She had processed more data in 3 days than in the previous 3 years, and all of it pointed in the same direction. And the direction made her mandibles click in a pattern her species associated with deep unease. She had found the Marshall Plan. After the humans' second great global war, the victors had spent billions rebuilding the nations they had just bombed into rubble. Germany, Japan, countries that had been enemies were rebuilt into economic powerhouses, integrated into alliance structures, and turned into some of the winning side's strongest partners. This was not unusual in galactic history. Many species offered aid to defeated foes. Good economics. But the humans had done it on a scale and with a speed that had no parallel. They had not waited for the fires to cool. They had sent food while the smoke was still rising. They had rebuilt factories that had been making weapons against them 6 months earlier. They had treated the wound before the patient understood it was no longer a war. And it worked. The former enemies did not rebel, did not rearm, did not seek revenge. They became part of the system that had broken them, not through subjugation, but through the simple, devastating logic of being rebuilt by the same hands that had torn them down. Halick found a human word for this: rehabilitation, and another one, integration, and a third, less formal, found in a soldier's memoir from one of their many wars. We did not beat them. We made them ours. She sat in her office and assembled her final report. She had to invent a new term for what the humans practiced, because nothing in 4 centuries of compact military science described a species that destroyed completely, rebuilt completely, and converted the result into an extension of itself. She called it conclusive integrative warfare. The definition she wrote was 3 sentences long. A military doctrine in which the objective is not the defeat of the enemy, but the permanent elimination of the enemy's capacity, willingness, and conceptual framework for continued conflict. This is achieved through total systemic destruction, followed by immediate reconstruction under the victor's framework. The result is not a defeated foe, but an integrated partner whose identity is restructured around cooperation with the former aggressor. She read it back to herself. It sounded clinical, precise. It did not capture the thing that frightened her. The thing that frightened her was the emotional range. A species capable of firebombing a city and then feeding its survivors. A species that could split the atom and then build hospitals. A species that held the apocalypse in one hand and a peace treaty in the other, and used both with the same calm, practiced efficiency. This was not a species of warriors. This was not a species of monsters. This was a species of everything, every possible response to every possible situation, all available, all practiced, all deployed without hesitation, based on what the moment required. The Compact's models assumed species had a range, aggressive or diplomatic, brutal or merciful, warlike or peaceful. Humans did not fit a range. Humans were the entire range, all at once, switchable without transition, without warning, without the decency of being predictable. Then she sat in her chair and watched the gas giant through her office window, and tried to imagine what it would look like if the Compact ever went to war with Earth. She could not. Not because the scenario was unthinkable, because every scenario she imagined ended the same way. The humans would end it, whatever it took, however long it took. They would find the load-bearing walls of the Compact's war machine and pull them out one by one. And then, when the dust settled, they would be standing in the rubble, with medical supplies and building materials, and a hand extended in friendship that no one would dare refuse. Because refusing meant the hand would come back, and the next time, it would not be offering friendship. On the observation deck, Vesk walked Asha back to the human barracks. The corridor was quiet. Their footsteps, his heavy, hers soft, made a pattern that sounded almost like a conversation. At the door, Asha stopped, turned. Vesk, your people fight to prove they are strong. Yes. Mine fight to make sure they never have to do it again. The door closed. Vesk stood in the corridor and listened to the station hum around him. The air recyclers, the gravity generators, the distant murmur of 1,000 lives going on behind walls he could not see through. He thought about Kethrin Val, the sacred shape of battle, the beauty of it, the honor. And then he thought about a species that did not care about the shape. A species that looked at the most beautiful, most honored, most sacred battle ever fought, and asked only one question. How do I make sure this never happens again? He walked back to his quarters, in the dark. The explosion came during breakfast. Not a simulation, not a drill. A real detonation, deep enough in the station's lower ring that the floor shuddered under Vesk's feet, and his tray of morning rations slid 3 inches to the left. The mess hall lights flickered. Emergency strips along the ceiling went red. Then the alarms. Vesk was on his feet before the first siren finished its cycle. Around him, cadets from 6 species did the same. Chairs scraping, food forgotten, hands reaching for weapons that were not there, because this was a dining hall, not a battlefield. The station's public address system crackled. A voice, calm, pre-recorded, automated, delivered the facts in 4 languages. A separatist faction had seized Transit Hub 7 on the lower civilian ring. Compact separatists, 40 to 60 armed individuals, military-grade weapons. They had taken the hub during the morning commuter cycle, which meant hostages. Estimates ranged from 300 to 500 civilians. The separatists had transmitted demands. Political prisoners released, compact military withdrawn from 3 contested systems. Standard list, standard desperation. The academy went to lockdown, all cadets confined to quarters. A compact peacekeeping fleet was 6 hours away. 6 hours. Vesk paced his quarters. His war blade hung on the wall, and he wanted to touch it, wanted the comfort of its weight. But he did not. Instead, he pulled up the station schematics on his datapad and studied the lower ring's layout the way he studied everything, with the focused intensity of someone who believed that understanding a problem was the first step toward deserving the right to solve it. Transit Hub 7 was a junction point. 4 corridors fed into a central atrium. The separatists had welded 3 of them shut and mined the 4th. They had cut into the station's communication grid, which meant they could monitor security channels. They had hostages arranged in 3 groups across the atrium's upper levels. Compact security had run the numbers. A breach assault would cost an estimated 40% hostage casualties. Unacceptable. Negotiation was the approved path. Negotiation, and waiting for the fleet. Vesk set down his datapad. 40%. 300 hostages at minimum. That meant 120 people dead in the best-case assault scenario. He stared at the wall and tried to find the version of himself that could accept those numbers for 6 hours. He could not find it. He went looking for Asha. He found her in a storage bay on Deck 14. Not her quarters, not the human common room. A storage bay. The kind of place no one would think to check, because no one stored anything important there. All 6 humans were present. They had cleared a space on the floor and spread out a set of printed on paper, diagrams of Transit Hub 7. Ro was on his back under a maintenance panel, doing something to a data conduit with a tool Vesk did not recognize. 2 other cadets were assembling equipment from components that looked like they had been taken from a dozen different systems and combined into something new. Asha was standing in the center of it all, her paper notebook in one hand, a communication device in the other. She was listening. Her eyes were doing the thing again, the targeting system thing, but faster now, sharper, like a machine that had been idling for weeks and had just been switched to full power. She looked at Vesk when he entered. She did not look surprised. "You mapped the hub," he said. "Station schematics are public record. We pulled them during orientation week." She paused. "We pull the schematics of every facility we enter." Habit. "You have a plan. We have a plan." She laid it out. Brief. No wasted words. The hub's climate system was independent of the main station grid. Its own air handlers, its own filtration. Ro had already tapped into its control conduit from the maintenance shaft. They could introduce an anesthetic compound, something from the human medical kit, mild, fast-acting on most carbon-based species, into 2 of the 3 hostage zones simultaneously. The 3rd zone was the problem. It was adjacent to the Separatist command post, and its air system had been manually disconnected. No gas, no remote option. Someone would have to go in. Ro had volunteered. He would enter through a maintenance shaft that was 8 inches wider than his shoulders. He had measured. Asha would handle the leader. She would walk into the command post, unarmed, hands open. Vesk felt something cold move through his chest. "You propose this to Academy Command?" "Yes." "Yes." They refused. Rules of engagement do not allow cadets in live operations. The storage bay was quiet. Ro's tool clicked softly under the maintenance panel. One of the other cadets tested a device, and it hummed once, then went silent. "You are going anyway," Vesk said. Asha looked at him. Her face did not change. Her eyes did not waver. She looked at him the way she had looked at the gas giant, steadily, patiently, as if she had already seen what was coming and had made her peace with it. "There are people in that hub," she said, "and in 6 hours some of them will be dead. Not because the Separatists want to kill them, because panic is a clock, and clocks run out." She folded her notebook closed. "We are not waiting for the fleet." Vesk stood in the storage bay doorway and watched the humans work. And something in him that had been built over 40 years of training and tradition and sacred shapes cracked down the middle. Because he understood. He understood that this was not bravery, and this was not recklessness, and this was not a violation of rules for the thrill of breaking them. This was what the humans had been the entire time. Under the mediocre scores, under the quiet watching, under the middle-of-the-pack performances and the paper notebooks, and the meal trays eaten in corners where no one was looking. They were people who could not sit still while other people died. It was that simple, and it was that terrifying. They moved at hour 2. Vesk watched the security feeds from a terminal he was not supposed to have access to. Ro had given him the bypass codes without being asked, as if he had already assumed Vesk would want to see, as if the humans had factored him into their plan without ever telling him. The hub's external power cut at 10:14 station time. One moment the lights were on. The next, darkness. The Separatists switched to emergency lanterns. In the confusion, 3 seconds of confusion, which was all the humans needed, the anesthetic compound entered the climate system in zones 1 and 2. 57 seconds. That was how long it took for the gas to work. Vesk watched the thermal signatures in those zones go horizontal, one by one, Separatists and hostages together, folding to the floor like puppets whose operators had fallen asleep. Zone 3. Ro's zone. The maintenance shaft was not designed for human use. It was designed for repair drones, small, flexible, mechanical. Ro was none of those things, but he fit, barely. And when he came through the access panel into Zone 3, he came through fast and low. And what happened next took 11 seconds. Vesk watched it on thermal imaging. 4 armed Separatists. Ro moved through them the way water moves through a pipe, finding the path of least resistance. Except there was no resistance, because by the time each Separatist understood what was happening, the understanding came too late. Ro did not fight the way the sparring ring taught fighting. There was no form, no technique a judge could score. There were just results. 4 bodies on the ground, breathing, disarmed, restrained with ties that Ro had carried in his belt. 11 seconds. 4 opponents. 0 casualties. It did not look heroic. It looked like maintenance, like a technician repairing a broken system, each motion precise and necessary, and completely without emotion. Asha entered the command post alone, hands open, no weapon. The Separatist leader, a Kralian, chitin-plated twice her height, had a charged weapon pointed at 3 remaining hostages. She told him what had already happened. His forces neutralized, his communications jammed, his exit routes collapsed. She said it the way a doctor delivers a diagnosis, clearly, without cruelty, but without any possibility of misunderstanding. "You have 10 seconds to put the weapon down," she said. "I am offering you those 10 seconds as a courtesy. My species learned to extend that courtesy. It does not come naturally." He put it down. The peacekeeping fleet arrived 4 hours later to a resolved situation. Hostages safe, Separatists restrained, and Vesk watched this part twice on the feed because he needed to be sure. Being given first aid by the same humans who had taken them down. Ro was bandaging the arm of a Separatist he had dislocated 90 minutes earlier. He did it carefully. The Separatists stared at him with an expression that Vesk recognized, because he had worn it himself. The expression of someone trying to understand how the same hands could do both things. Graduation was 3 days later. Vesk received highest honors among Dralith cadets. His name was entered into his clan's military rolls with a commendation that his great-grandchildren would read. It should have been the proudest moment of his life. Asha's team received no official commendation. Their unsanctioned action was technically a disciplinary violation. The paperwork was filed. The reprimands were issued. It was noted and recorded and placed in the appropriate bureaucratic container. But Vesk saw something else being filed. Every species delegation at the graduation ceremony submitted a quiet addendum to their academy reports. He watched his own commander writing one. He had already read Halik's version, passed through back channels, shared among cadets in the way that important truths are always shared, not through official reports, but through whispers. Recommend immediate integration of human tactical doctrine into all compact training programs. further recommend that no military action against human-held territories be considered under any circumstances. Not because they cannot be defeated, because they do not fight to defeat. They fight to end, and we do not yet understand what that means. Asha found him after the ceremony. She was carrying her kit bag over one shoulder, the same way she had carried it on the first day, like it weighed nothing, or like she had stopped caring. She was shipping back to Earth, no fanfare, no ceremony. Just a transport and a departure time and a quiet walk to the docking bay. Hey Vesk. Yes? Train with us sometime. Her mouth did that curve again. The one that was not quite a smile. Not against us. She walked away. Her footsteps were soft. Human soft. The kind of soft that should not have been able to carry the weight of everything Vesk now knew about what those feet could do, where they could go, what they could walk into and walk out of, while the rest of the galaxy was still waiting for permission. He watched her go. He did not find it comforting. He found it like standing on the edge of the observation deck and looking out at the gas giant. That vast, turning, patient thing, and realizing for the first time that it was not just scenery. It had been there the whole time, holding moons in orbit, shaping the paths of everything near it, through nothing but the quiet, constant fact of what it was. The humans were going home. And Vesk understood, with the clarity of a man who has seen the mountain and can never again pretend it is a hill, that the galaxy had not welcomed a new species into the compact. The compact had walked into the humans' orbit, and no one had noticed, because the humans had been patient and quiet and smiling.